Maxey from outside. Sixers lead, courtesy of Tyrese Maxey.
Deep to left field, going back is Locastro. It is gone!
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. An exciting episode today as we continue on with our college football preview series. We have the Texas Longhorns, and we're recording this on Monday, the 19th. That means it's officially here. Game week 0 is upon us. Georgia Tech, Florida State, just 5 short days away from kicking off at noon over in Dublin, Ireland. We finally made it, but we're going to be hitting on a bunch of the big hitters still. We still got Texas to get through, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama. Got a handful of these premier programs still to go as we get closer and closer to week 1 kicking off. Next Thursday, we actually got some pretty good games. Colorado plays North Dakota State. That's a fun one. Minnesota plays North Carolina. So we still have some teams to hit on before we start to get into some real action. As we said, we got 4 games week 0 this week, but we'll continue on today with our preview. And the Longhorns are one of the major faces, if not the biggest face of realignment. Them in Oklahoma announcing their move to the SEC a couple years ago. That really was kind of the start of it all and this domino effect. And we've seen what it has come to now. The Pac-12 completely folds, just leaving behind Oregon State and Washington State. And now you got Texas and Oklahoma, 2 of the premier brands in all of college football in the SEC. So Texas last year had a ride off into the sunset type of season, winning the Big 12 and going to the college football playoff, kind of anointing themselves as back as they now transition into the SEC from the Big 12. This year's Longhorns team is still led by head coach Steve Sarkisian, 25-14, entering year 4 at Texas, 71-49 in his 10 years as a college head coach. I'm still not completely sold on him. I do think he kind of got out-coached in that Washington game in the college football playoff. And last year was the first year he ever won double-digit games. He won 9 games in one season. The rest has been 8 or below. So he only has 1 year out of 10 that he's reached double digits. And then it was last year's most successful year. So you might say that he's, figured it out. He's starting to build, but I'm still not completely sold on him. He knows how to recruit. He knows how to get talent into the door, but some of the X's and O's and coaching decisions on game day have plagued them throughout, his time as an offensive coordinator in the NFL, his time as a college head coach. So I'm still not completely sold on him yet to be a national championship head coach. He's proven to become a much better coach and a successful coach. But he leads the Longhorns into the season this year again as he enters year 4. And Texas enters this year as number 4 in the country. So lofty expectations coming off a year where they went to the playoff, and it's expected that they're going to be a playoff team once again. When you look at the 2023 season, 12-2, 8-1 record in the Big 12, they had that lone loss in the Big 12 conference play to Oklahoma, and then they went on and won the Big 12 title game against Oklahoma State. Go on to the college football playoff last year, play Washington in the semis, lose 37-31, had a chance to win it at the end after Washington was pretty much in control most of the game. Texas kind of makes a last-ditch effort, but wildly successful season, I think, for Texas. That was kind of their first, nationally relevant year where they were a legit national title contender in quite some time, almost about a decade, maybe even a little bit more. But major breakthrough year, and now it's a completely different ballgame, though, when you head into the SEC. Every week is a test. Every week is a challenge. You don't get some of the cupcakes that you do in the Big 12. So Texas is going to be tested right out of the gate, and not just back to relevance, in the media, but on the field. I think there's legit people, they don't want to play Texas anymore. The talent's always been there, but it's always been, coaching mistakes or just random injuries popping up that just plague the team. Texas is a feared national opponent now. They go to the SEC. As we said, it's going to be a little bit different. They're going to have to step up their game against some of these big boys. But the transition from Big 12 to SEC, I think it's going to be an interesting one to watch because I think Texas is walking in like, we're the big bad wolf. We're here to dominate this conference. And you still got Alabama and Georgia at the top there being like not so fast. So they had a headline win last year going to Alabama, winning that game. So that kind of, I think, is a big boost of confidence, especially when your quarterback and Quinn Ewers is back and the head coach as well. That proves, we can go and do that. But still, they've been recruiting like an SEC school, but it's just different when you have to do it week in, week out. You go and play Alabama 10 times last year, you probably split them 5-5. Now you got to go and do it every single week. Do you have the depth? Do you get worn down? Do your guys match up talent for talent with a Georgia, with an Auburn, with a Alabama, with a Ole Miss, any of those teams that are preparing to compete for SEC titles? It's going to be an interesting watch, and one of the main things I'm keeping my eye out for this year. Offense and defense were both very good last year, a very balanced team, ranked 15th in scoring offense and scoring defense last year. They were dominant when they were at their best in 9 of their 12 wins. They were by double digits, and they had an average margin of victory of 20.5 points per game. Quinn Ewers, as we touched on, opted not to go to the draft. He returns for his third year starting quarterback at Texas, putting him right up there with Cam Rising, Jackson Dart as some of the most experienced quarterbacks in the sport. And this is year 4 of Sark. He just seems to be getting more and more comfortable at Texas, and it's never been, his ability to call offensive plays or whatnot. It's just been some of these kind of in-game decisions and game plan stuff at times. Great offensive mind and all the talent in the world on this team. Just going to be interested to see if they're impacted by realignment or they can keep it rolling and improving just like they have done every year under Sark since he got to Texas and took over that job. When you look at the offense for this team, was a really dynamic offense last year, as we talked about, ranked 15th in scoring, 24th in rushing, 17th in passing, and 9th in total offense. And the offense is headlined by bringing back Ewers as he enters 2024 with the third best odds to win the Heisman at 10-1. One thing with Ewers, though, he's missed time each year as a starter with injury. The collarbone, he had the shoulder injury. If he misses time this year, it's going to get turned over to Arch Manning. And as people like to say, he could get Wally pipped where, all right, Arch Manning gets his shot, goes in there, lights it up. Does he just run away with the job and take Texas home from there? That remains to be seen. So past couple of years, there was another guy behind Quinn Ewers. Last year was Malik Murphy. He got a couple starts. This year, it's Arch Manning. If Arch Manning gets the opportunity, I doubt he relinquishes it. So a lot of pressure for Quinn Ewers to stay healthy, and I know sometimes that's uncontrollable, but that's another story for another day. But the offense with Ewers running the show, I mean, whether or not Ewers is running it, Arch Manning is still going to get talked about, get some headlines, get some attention. But he's running it for now. He enters the year at the third best Heisman odds, and he has a chance to make his name for himself as a potential first-round pick. You look at the guys who are kind of being talked about at the top there with the quarterback, Shedeur Sanders, Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers with a good year. He leads Texas to a national title. He's right up there firmly in the conversation himself as well. I mean, this was a guy that was the former number 1 overall recruit in the country. He was the highest-rated quarterback prospect ever, I believe, until Arch Manning. So a lot of pressure on him, though, to deliver, and I think he came back to kind of, finish the job, finish the story that they got tripped up last year in the semis to Washington. He believes he can bring this team back, go in the SEC, and then go win a national title in this new expanded 12-team playoff. But this offense only returns 5 starters from last year's team that averaged 36 points per game. Ewers and then 4 offensive linemen, as they just need to replace last year's right tackle. They have Kelvin Banks at left tackle. He's a projected top 15 pick in the NFL draft. And the skill position players, we're going to be seeing a bunch of new faces, but the Longhorns have, under Sark, been raking in recruits and transfers as well. So they should be really talented there at the skill spots again. It could just take some time to get going. And that's been kind of the story with a lot of these teams that I talked about. Like Florida State's one team. Miami's a team that could take some time, that relying on a bunch of new guys at the skill spot. Alabama as well. I mean, so many of these new teams with the transfer portal and just, nature of guys graduating and going to the draft, they're going to have to be putting in some new talent and to make up for that lost production. Georgia's a team as well that we'll talk about in our next episode that has to do it. It's so rare to have guys return for multiple years now in college football. So you always have to be ready to get that next group up and going. And they brought in arguably the next or the best wide receiver that entered the portal this year, and Isaiah Bond from Alabama. He's best known for catching that fourth and forever from Jalen Milroe in the Iron Bowl to win that. But he's a very talented receiver, a speedy guy. And they also brought in Matthew Golden from Houston and Silas Bolden from Oregon State. So 3 big-time transfers out of the portal. The projected top 2 backs, though, on this Texas offense in the rushing game, and C.J. Baxter and freshman Christian Clark, they were lost for the season in camp due to injuries. One was an Achilles and one was a knee. So the depth chart is really kind of shuffled up now. It's, I think, a pretty open job. I think they only have 2 or 3 more guys on scholarship at running back there. So they're kind of thin at running back. Jonathan Brooks, the starting running back from last year, graduated, went to the draft. So this is a running back spot that's a big time question mark. And that's one thing with college football where it's like, they have their training camp, obviously, their scrimmages, but you don't really get a good look at teams without a kind of a preseason. And so it's going to be some new, inexperienced guys there at the running back spot. The offense last year, one of the major downfalls of the offense was they fumbled the ball 9 times. That was 95th worst in the nation. That's something that I'm sure that they've emphasized throughout this offseason. They also struggled on third down. They ranked only 70th, and they really struggled in the red zone, ranking only 120th in the country. So that was a major red flag and kind of surprising that they were still able to put up that much points and struggle in the red zone. Ewers doesn't really add anything in the running game, which could be a major part of their struggles there with that red zone offense, because he doesn't have that ability to, 2nd and 7 from the 7, the ability to call up a QB run and get him in there somehow. That's a major deficiency in football today with so many teams that do rely on these athletic quarterbacks. When you go to the defense as well, though, the defense was a really strong unit too, ranked 15th in scoring defense and 3rd in rush defense, one of the best rush defenses in the entire country. Where they really struggled, though, was against the pass. They only ranked 113th there, and Washington was able to beat them deep in the playoffs, put up 37 points. Washington, as we know, Michael Penix, Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, that was a really talented group of receivers and quarterbacks, and that was kind of the nightmare matchup for them. Like they almost would have been better suited to play like a Michigan, who wanted to run the ball, and that was Texas' strong suit on the defensive side. So teams realized they couldn't run on this team early in the year, only allowed 82 yards per game on the ground. So they went to the air, and that's where they eventually, ran into that Washington team that was the demise of them. Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat were the 2 main pieces on that defense at the defensive tackle spot. They're off to the NFL, so the linebackers brought in a pair of transfers from Arizona to try and plug those positions and keep that run defense really strong. Defense as a whole, though, returned 7 starters. Linebacker Anthony Hill Jr. being the main kind of emerging star on this defense. He was the Big 12 freshman of the year last year on the defensive side of the ball. So that's a guy to watch going forward in the SEC. Secondary also only has 1 returning starter, but they brought back in safety they brought in a transfer safety, Mabuka from Clemson. He's a guy that has experience playing kind of all over the defensive backfield. So a secondary that struggled last year only has 1 guy returning. So you could look at that like, all right, they got some new talent in there to hopefully improve that side of the ball. But the secondary, I do think, is going to be an area of concern for this Texas team going forward this year as well. We'll pull up the entire Texas schedule now and break it down game by game. One of the most anticipated games of the college football season, especially in the non-con, when they go to Michigan week 2, that's going to be probably one of the top 5 highest watched games this season. But they start out with Colorado State. I think that should be a fun one, but Texas should win pretty comfortably at the end of the day. But Colorado State's a team in the Mountain West that could make some noises here. Going to Michigan, that's a big one. That's going to be a tough one. But I am going to have them win that game. I do think they're a little bit more talented than this Michigan team. I think Michigan definitely takes a step back coming off the national title. As we said, that could have been last year's national title if they didn't get tripped up there by Washington. But a little bit worried about Michigan on the offensive side of the ball. I think Texas has a little bit more returning continuity there, especially at the quarterback spot. That gives me a little faith. And that would be a statement win going all the road to Michigan win that game. UTSA, never a cakewalk, but I'll give Texas a win there. UL Monroe, projected to be one of the worst teams in all of college football this year. I'll give Texas a win there. So a 4-0 start. Mississippi State, projected towards the bottom of the SEC. I'm going to give the Texas a win there. Oklahoma and the Red River rivalry, I have them winning this game as well. Last year, Oklahoma got the best of them. I think Oklahoma is going to struggle more than Texas in the transition to the SEC. Be like a 7-5, 6-6 squad this year. So we'll have Texas win that game. This is where I have Texas first getting tripped up. Georgia is our next episode, but Georgia's 3 toughest games at Alabama, at Georgia, and at Ole Miss. you have to figure Georgia's not going to drop all those, and I am higher on Alabama and Ole Miss, surprisingly, than Texas this year. So I am going to have Georgia win that game. Vanderbilt, easy win. Florida, I'm going to have them win that game at Arkansas. Arkansas is going to be towards the bottom of SEC most likely. I'm going to have them win that one. Versus Kentucky, win that one. And then going into the Texas A&M game, big rivalry here. First time these two schools have played in quite some time. Texas A&M comes into the year, I think, ranked number 20. I expect them to be a team that flirts with 8 to 10 wins in that range. I have them personally going 8-4, but could see them being like a 9-3 squad at the end of the day. I'm going to have Texas dropping this game, going to Texas A&M. Big win for A&M there. So I have Texas actually going 10-2. I'm definitely a little bit lower on them than most people, I think. Over 10.5 or 10.5 is the line. So most people are expecting this team to be, an 11-win squad, plus 150 for the over, and the under is minus 180. It's a stay away for me. It's one that I'm not going to touch. They're minus 230 to make the playoffs, so they're pretty heavily favored to make it. Plus 175 to miss. If you made me bet on one thing for Texas, I would probably do the no. Would be the most likely thing for me there at plus money. I do have them making it, but as the last at-large team getting that number 11 spot, I could see a scenario where they only win 9 games and definitely wouldn't go to the playoff. But it's a team that has lofty national expectations, plus 320 to win the SEC and plus 850 to win it all. I'm personally not as high on them. I do have them sneaking in there as that 11th spot, one spot ahead of the G5 team. But I think they lose a lot. And as I said, I'm still not completely sold on Sark. Only one double-digit win season as a head coach in 10 years. I think that's a major red flag. So I'll be going horns down this year. Not as big of a believer in them as most, but a lot of people have these guys as a surefire playoff team. I have them making it, but just barely hanging on there by a thread. As always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and we'll talk.